Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, I was just double checking the recording. You're good to go?
Okay, so this event is being recorded. Today, the Arts Commission Committee for Anti-Racism and Equity and the Metro Arts staff are joining by conference call. In a moment, we will call roll of all members present. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available to the public no later than 48 hours after the meeting. Any action items decided by consensus at today's meeting will be reconfirmed at the next in-person meeting of the committee. So now I will go ahead and do a roll call of members present. As I am taking roll call, we will be bringing up the CARE group norms on the screen as well. Thank you. For each committee member, if you would say your, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to say your name and ask if you're present. And so if you will just answer verbally, that would be great. Alandis?
Present.
Ellen?
Present.
Megan?
Present.
Thank you. Terry?
Present.
Thank you. I will now call for a motion that the meeting agenda constitutes essential business of this body, and meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans considering the COVID-19 outbreak, and is permitted under the governor's executive order number 60. I'll need someone to propose a motion to this effect. Please, you can either raise your hand or you can just speak out.
This is Megan.
Thank you, Megan. I'll need a second.
This is second.
Ellen, thank you. Okay, well then, if anyone has comments on this motion, please raise your hand and I will call on you. Okay, let's do a roll call vote. I'm going to go through the list of members in attendance, and please vote, even if you did, motion. So, Alandis.
Yes.
Ellen.
Yes.
Megan. Megan.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Yes, please.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Terry.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, the motion passes. I will now pass the meeting, to Janine to facilitate our information session.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you all for taking the time to do the readings. I was, just reviewing it earlier too. I think I'll invite Megan, if you wouldn't mind muting yourself too. I mean, we didn't talk too much about this, but we did check in about the readings prior. So again, also thank you, Megan, for that. I think I would just love, I don't know, if we just want to like kind of share first thoughts about this, and I'll just start off with that first proposed discussion question. Which of these characteristics are at play in your life, in the life of your organization or community? And then we'll kind of move on to some of the other questions. And I think Grace will be sharing, so stop sharing the PowerPoint, and then she'll be sharing the actual list, the article that has a list of the norms. And so, yeah, I think, I know just going through them myself, some of them struck me more than others. Some of them were like I had like some very like vivid, examples and several examples. Others, a few, a lot of them mixed. So anyways, I don't want to add too much to the conversation, but would anyone like to start? Or maybe because, you know what, let's just shift gears. Sorry about this, guys. Why don't we just, why don't we just go like bit by bit and talk about perfectionism and kind of, and just go through like the list that way, since that's what's on the screen. Yeah. Did anyone have any kind of initial thoughts about this and how it plays in, it shows up in your own life or in your organization?
I'll be glad to jump in.
Great.
This is Jonathan. Sorry, I'm
Hey,
a few
Jonathan.
minutes late. I was kind of
Great to have you.
shifting from one meeting context to another. I mean, I'd like to jump in because we actually, at work, we actually took this reading and we discussed it as a group at my work. Like this happened before. This was kind of a separate thing that happened a while ago, just as part of our ongoing conversations internally, understanding what you know, understanding how we're going to kind of move our own commitments organizationally forward. I mean, I guess what I'd like to say is I think it is it was a great exercise to have everybody speak into it and to see different ways these things kind of show up in an organizational context. And, particularly when we're talking about an orchestra, let's acknowledge there's like so many layers to white supremacy culture playing out in how we function, even in terms of the art form and kind of the kind of everything that radiates out from that. So we talked a lot, particularly from an administrative side, about all of the ways that that these behaviors play out. Perfectionism being a great example, particularly the prioritization of one standard or one idealized standard over other standards of what one would consider acceptable. One of the things I wanted to share from that conversation is that our CEO said, you know what, if you just looked at the qualities that are being described here as kind of damaging characteristics of white supremacy culture, and then you just show this to any business leader outside the context of defining it as white supremacy culture, they would say, well, these are all hallmarks of like a really bad work culture and bad work environment. So the irony is that all of these things that are normalized in our behaviors are actually things that if we call them out and look at them outside the context of kind of normal operating procedure, what we see is that these are things that are harmful on so many levels, and in fact hold us back from realizing our best work and our best ways of working with each other. So I think in terms of our own organization, we kind of used it as an opportunity to say, that we can no longer separate out what is good business practice or good organizational practice from what is a kind of a right, or maybe right is not the best word to use actually, but what is our best effort in terms of actualizing our commitment to creating, to instilling multicultural values and how we function as an organization, and also how we're going to realize that in terms of the ways in which we produce the art that we create and engage the community that we're seeking to serve.
Yeah, that's, thank you for sharing that, Jonathan. That's, yeah, stirring a lot of stuff in me as well right now. But I don't want to steal the conversation. Would anyone else like just unmute and share right now about perfectionism?
I just want to echo real quick what Jonathan said about organizational best practices. When I read the list, I just kind of said, well, this is what I teach my students not to do. This is how not to lead an organization. So it's interesting that from a business perspective, we would never have a climate like this, but we see that we do on a day-to-day basis in so many other avenues.
I think I will share just my anecdote now that I wrote down. So yeah, kind of just some things that I've observed about perfectionism, and this is like a recent like observation. Like, so if initial outcomes and processes are not, like tidy, linear, complete, complete. Sometimes the narrative that has emerged at times is, oh, the project or the process or the person is like chaotic or formless. A mess has been used at some times, and this is, I've heard this a few times in different situations, and so but when those but and that's like just a kind of like gut reaction talking about, oh, this process, it's so chaotic. And but what they're referring to was a process that includes things like consensus decision making or community input, things that not necessarily as administrators we have control of all the time, when multiple voices are being shared. And so or projects that land in the gray area, that don't fit neatly into categories. Anyway, and I also wrote like this is tied to a sense of urgency, definitely, and several of the other characteristics listed below. But I was like, wow, this is this one's coming to life for me for sure. Anyone else? Maybe we should scroll down to the next one, Grace, if anyone wants to talk about sense of urgency or defensiveness, and what they've seen. And let me look at the.
Hey, this is Terry. I think I've got one. I'll try to make sense of it. I'm working with an organization who is in its infancy in its awareness of complicitness in the white supremacist space. And I mean, it's really very simple. What happens is their sense of urgency is this won't take as long as we think it will. We know it's work. We know it needs to be internalized, but when I try to express the fact that it's a time allotment, that it's a timeline that needs to be followed, not necessarily a schedule, but that it's not an immediate fix, their persistent retort is, but it just doesn't take that long, does it? We don't have to work that hard or that long to affect the change we're looking for. And just, for me, it goes from a side eye to a blank stare, because it flies by me that they see it that way.
And which is funny because, when working with students, and I've like worked with little ones, like the more successful ones, the ones that actually do have like the better outcomes academically are not the ones that are like, oh, this is easy, I can do this in a flash. Those are actually the kids that don't do as well academically, right? And the ones that are like, I'm really going to take my time and I'm going to do it right. I'm going to get this, and this is hard and I'm going to work on it, are like, just statistically speaking, the ones that like the students that like academically do better. So it's funny also that you kind of brought that up as like, this is just supposed to be like, it just needs to this just needs to happen in a snap. Like this needs to be easy in the snap. Like, and actually like things that are, things that are that have a great, value take a long time and are hard.
Yes, they mistake their perception of their own earnestness as being enough, and don't realize that they're still, even in that, they're working within the framework of that perfectionist. I'm right, so what I do must be right, and what I believe must be right, and so I can do it. It's done, and still no. It just floors me how they just don't grasp the concept of internalization. They think they're there. So anyway.
Yeah. Did that strike anyone else, or is there any other examples of sense of urgency or defensiveness?
This is Ellen. the third one down, the reinforced by funding proposals, which promise too much work for all that happens to us all the time as a smaller organization with a small staff. And it's so contrary to the different mix of cultures that we have in our organization. So it always ends up, being me that has to pull it all together to make sure it meets all the requirements to close out grants and stuff, because our way of working is very chaotic, I have to say. I mean, most people would probably go nuts, but it works for us. But then when you get, $2,500 or $5,000 and you're supposed to have all these outcomes-based things to measure, and our mission, is pretty much an anti-racism mission, so it's kind of hard to measure as easily. So it does create urgency all the time in closing out projects and closing out funding proposals. So I'm glad it's listed there because, I think it is a problem for many organizations.
Yeah, and that's really, that's such good feedback as a funding organization, to hear. And it makes sense. I mean, and it's definitely, we see it too. Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons a lot of the smaller BIPOC organizations don't apply, right? Because it's just like, I don't mean just to the Arts Commission, but for other proposals, because it's just an overwhelming amount of work they have to do for a little bit of money that, yes, they can do a project, but then if that has to be matched, they have to scramble to figure that out. So I think it is a constant issue in the nonprofit world.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Ellen, can I ask you a quick question? Do you feel as though the Arts Commission could do better in that space?
Well, I mean, for us, we do general operating. We don't do any of the project grants. And I am a perfectionist. I admit it. I mean, I dot every T and cross, dot every I and cross every T, and I'm a stickler for punctuation and grammar and stuff. But so for me, I can keep up with the requirements that Metro has. But I look at, like the Thrive and some of the others, and I've had to help many a person with their grant for different project grants or even for smaller general operating grants. So I think it's not easy for everyone. And I think that it would be great if Metro Arts had like someone on staff that could actually hold hands the first time organizations or individual artists go through the process. And sometimes I've made decisions not to apply for a grant that's small, that requires a lot of work, even though we desperately need money, just because I know our staff can't do the work, can't do all the things that you have to do for that particular grant. But then sometimes people just scramble to get a little bits here and there. And so it might be nice for us to find a way to train organizations, especially those that are smaller and struggling, how to prioritize what kind of funding they should go for, and maybe ones that don't have to be matched.
Yeah, that matching, no match is something we've definitely talked about.
Yeah.
And also, it's hard that, like our littlest grant, which is our ABC pass-through grant, has the same regulations as our largest grants. So,
right.
Yeah.
That may be something we want to talk about as a committee.
Mm-hmm.
How do we kind of institute change in that space?
Yes, agreed.
Definitely.
I'm gonna make a note of it.
Grace, do you want to scroll a little bit? Anyone else? I'm trying to look at everybody. Like I have my grid screen so I can see people, but just feel free to also unmute yourself. And sorry if I didn't plan to do like a call out kind of thing. I just wanted to be a little free flow. So apologies if it is a little chaotic, a little nonlinear. All right, so quantity over quality. I feel like that one is, I saw John, a big one. And so much, and it's just a lot of things, And I think it is so tied to that sense of urgency too, of just like, what can we crank out?
That's what I was just going to say, is very tied to the one we just discussed. And again, if your work and your mission is not something that can easily be measured, which is something we've struggled with for 24, 25 years, it's very hard to apply for some grants that are real outcomes-based management type measurement goals that they want. I mean, I think the Arts Commission, at least the grant we apply for, that's not an issue. But I know for a lot of other grants, and then sometimes like new emerging organizations and organizations by people for whom English is not their first language, just their language may not have the words that explain measurable goals, right? And so just reaching out to those communities and organizations and helping them understand what is meant by a measurable goal would be helpful, I think.
I just add, I mean, this happens consistently in the work that I do, especially when you're working with small groups of people or small communities, and then people will come in and say, "Oh, this is great. Can you triple this? Can you triple this?" And I say, "Well, we don't have capacity to triple the artists who are working with these young people." I mean, that's the mix. It's not just add water and stir. It's a deal where, and I think the idea of bigger is better. There have been so many projects over the last 20 years that personally worked on or started, where people are like, well, hey, we'll sell this to the YMCA and they'll buy it and they'll put a lot of money into it. And then everything becomes diluted at that point. So I think that there's something to say for broad is not necessarily deep. And the depth of community impact, I think, is really important, even if you're only able to serve a few people who can make and just have a greater, deeper impact. So I see this happen a lot, and it is frustrating because you still need money to survive. And and so you're like, okay, well, we'll try this expansion. And then it's all about, usually for me, from a programmatic standpoint, as an artist or a coordinator, it's about how do I clone the people I already have. And, that science is just not available to me at this point.
Well, it takes so long for, I mean, like for like apprenticeships, right? Like create, or just even developing relationships within your own staff. And then it takes a long time, and it requires a lot of trust. But yeah, I mean, coming from the program side, like in my, previous role, just as program manager for an arts organization, I mean, this is all about, we get we get the money, and it was just like, do what you need to do to get, to do the grant report properly. And then, sometimes there's like there are like beautiful, wonderful things that happen, and sometimes it doesn't. But as long as those numbers are right, that's what, I mean, at least my previous, in my previous life, that's what was most cared about.
And
Well,
I'll go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ellen.
I was just say I would rather have a child in our program for 12 years and get to know the parents and the grandparents and really make an impact, and then have their kids, like we're on our third generation now. But to me, that's more impactful to have, say, 25 kids that you get in deep with than 250 kids that you touch, right?
And this is Megan, and I think that's also an aspect of staffing. I've worked with institutions have high numbers of diversity hires, quote, quote, but don't really look at the turnover rates, or don't even look at necessarily what those relationships are like while they're there. And I've definitely also worked with organizations that will bring people into the spaces, but not actually provide them any agency to be part of leadership. Like having an advisory board primarily of people of color, but they have no actual voting basis. All they can do is make recommendations, which for an all-white board don't pass. Or being within an institution, but not actually being involved in any of the leadership conversations, and the leadership of the organization remains a predominantly if not entirely white system. So it's that technically on paper you have people who are there, but in terms of actually engaging a quality relationship, that just doesn't exist. Also, I'm having trouble with a little bit of mic feedback, so I'm trying to mute as much as I can. I apologize in advance.
Yeah, no worries, Megan. Anyone else want to jump in on this one? I heard somebody.
Sure. I'll say just a little bit, just working for a large organization, where sort of the ability to reach a lot of people has been sort of historically a talking point. What's interesting is that I have realized that over the last 5 years, as we instituted a program that is funded by the Mellon Foundation, that's really about it's creating that's speaking exactly what you talked about, Ellen, which is the idea of having a small number of people that you build relationship with and really develop meaningful progress toward a set of outcomes over time. We now have this program that's designed to do that, working with students, starting as young as 5th grade and going through high school, where we're able to kind of, have that opportunity to work with them for, up to 8 years. It has been a real kind of transformational shift, in part because one of the things that I've noticed, one of the wonderful benefits that's come from that, is that you see the relationships that the people in the program develop with each other as well. So that you're actually building community in a whole other way, just by creating that space and providing the resources. And I think it's been great to see this program be given, the funding and the space it needs to grow and thrive, and hope that we continue to do it. But what's interesting is that it doesn't mean we've gotten rid of that attachment to quantity and being able to talk about sort of numbers and impact. And so I think it's I just wanted to name that and say that I think there's a real kind of, we sometimes live in the space of both aspects. And I think in some ways there's a little bit of kind of a, kind of box checking thing that happens, like, hey, we've got this great, impact program that's all about creating a pathway for young BIPOC musicians to become artists, and in having sort of and in accomplishing that, it's like we haven't used that as an opportunity to challenge cultural norms about how we define the value of other programs, right? I think that is happening in other ways. I think, but I'm just acknowledging that we still have an attachment to talking about broad reach because it sounds good. And also because we have board members who want to see and hear that stuff, who are constantly in a space of numbers because they're fixated on, on our budget and all that stuff, and validating their own investment in the institution.
Go ahead. I just wanted to add just one last thing for me, that just as a person who's a freelancer, who's specializes in creating projects, because I want programs that I create to become larger to a degree, but I feel like once you go beyond your ability to meet the objectives that you initially started the work for, then it just gets to be, it's all about self-sabotage. You get so big that you can't even meet the goals that you set out to meet prior, and then the work becomes about something else, and it just becomes performative.
This, Ellen, and another thing I think along the same lines is we've been asked to design programming for large organizations before, and then they want like a showcase for their funders after 6 weeks, right? And so these poor kids, they know they haven't mastered anything well enough to perform for anyone, but it's like a dog and pony show, to try to get more money for the same program, which you're really not allowing the artist or the students to get any kind of proficiency and feel comfortable sharing. John, I'm sure you've been there.
Well, yeah, Larry, again, like not to take up too much space, but I've had to be in a place where I said, okay, so if people are coming to share, then it's going to be a share. It's not a performance. It's not going to conform to these norms, and it's all got to be about all the people that are actually involved in the program. The young people, if it's young people, the young people first need to decide what aspects of this process would you like to share with other people, and what are you comfortable with, and we'll work from there. As opposed to it needs to look a certain way because we're funding this program, because it's there again, it's not gonna. That's not why we're doing the work, and it just sorry.
Yeah, and totally related to perfectionism. And I think, further down the, not valuing the process, but valuing just the product. I've definitely have issues with that, and kind of not celebrating the like information in progress work. Like, this is amazing. The fact that it's in progress is amazing. Like, that's amazing, but it's not just like, it's not Broadway ready yet. So anyways, anyone else? Thank you so much for all these insights. I'm really curious about this next one, worship of the written word, because I actually have a little bit of a dissenting view. As I'll start it off, and I use the written word a little bit as a shield to protect against unofficial conversations that like where I'm supposed to read between the lines. And so I really do. I was like, I want you to tell me exactly what you need. I don't want to guess. I don't want to mind read. And I don't want expectations to change later. So, as a person of color, arts administrator, like my whole career, really, I've always been like, what do you need me to do exactly? And don't change it. And always going back to those later. So, I do use it as a shield. That might be some internalization. But that's kind of how it comes out for me. But I understand, because I think I know that it's so valued in the world, that is my shield. It's like, well, it's not written down. Well, if it was so important, you should have written it down. So that's my defensiveness that comes out a little bit, and that internalization of using the written word, this thing that I know is valued. Anyone else have similar experiences or just some comments about worship of the written word, or only one right way?
Yeah, so this is Megan, and I too would love other perspective, because for me, yeah, it is kind of a shield. A lot of times I feel like the goalpost can keep shifting for BIPOC people in terms of what the expectations are, or what's considered acceptable, or what's considered excellence. So for me, yeah, it has always been kind of this like, okay, here's something that we can both come back and look at, so I can show what actually happened and where it went. And so, yeah, I would be curious if there's different perspective. And I do think it is worthwhile, like they talk about the antidotes to that, where they're talking about like looking at all the different ways that information is shared. And yeah, I'm curious, because I also think that there are a lot of times, typically within, very predominantly white structures, where there are a lot of conversations that happen casually that BIPOC staff may or may not necessarily be a part of, or, even be welcome in. And so I'm curious too, like in thinking about that, like, how does this all come together? So yeah, I would love other perspective.
Good afternoon, everyone. I thought this one goes hand in hand kind of with fear of open conflict. And it feels like, sometimes when you have these situations in conflict, the first thing you're supposed to do is go to, what do you have records of? What happened here? You're looking at an email thread trying to dissect, who said what, who did what. And it's interesting, Megan, that you talk about those conversations that happen kind of in between the lines, where, there's the process, whatever it is going on, officially through work, that creates the conflict. And then there's like the kind of side conversation, but then somehow that side conversation, and it's involved heavily in kind of the conflict resolution, and there's no record of that. But when you try to defend yourself, the only thing you can use to, to speak on your word is what has been recorded. And it's funny, I used to not keep records of anything until college. I almost didn't graduate last semester because I had gone abroad and got credits approved and came back, and administration switches. And next thing you know, I'm like running around campus, but I had this sheet that I had gotten signed before I left with all my professor's signature. And ultimately that was kind of the thing that saved me. So it was kind of a lesson learned. But, in those situations, if you don't have something that, proves your point, and there's not an opportunity for you to have proper input, it creates a situation where it works against you, because even though you don't have a record, even though you do have a record of what was said, there's a missing hole that somehow works against you, which I think we've seen in time and time again, where, okay, well, what happened there? We see the product, we see the work, we see the measurable goals. Okay, cool, program's doing great, awesome. People are recognizing it, all these media hits, but then there's that untold story of performance that is not reflected in the actual, information and measurable goals. So I think that's where this is. I've seen, I guess, specifically this used in it's kind of an in between gray area of the two for me.
Yeah, definitely, Trey. Grace, yes, our archives person, I want your feedback.
Actually, as a side note to what I was going to say, this is actually a big topic in archive studies, because worship of the written word has been so much of that industry, and history is only kept by what's written down. And there's really kind of a reckoning going on of like, why don't we, accept oral or visual traditions of information, and what histories have been left out because we're only accepting this form. And so if anybody ever wants to talk about records and archival history, this is a really, it's what I'm studying right now, and I'm really very interested in. And I think it's important. And actually does kind of tie into what I was going to say. I would say as the admin for Metro Arts, this one really struck me, and about a lot of the things, like when I'm writing minutes for these meetings, or even when I'm putting together the agenda, it is a useful tool to share what we're doing, to kind of record what happened for people that are interested. But I have to admit, when we get to action items, I go back and forth a lot about how much to put in and to not put in. I think my goal is to let people know what happened and hopefully bring them to this recording, because I don't feel like I'm qualified and or capable of communicating, what y'all say, what y'all discuss in a meaningful way. I almost kind of want to put like a little asterisk, like just go watch the recording. It's only an hour and a half. You'll get so much more out of, like, I will have to figure out how to write and communicate what this informational session was. And there's so many powerful things that were said that I can't put in minutes. So this made me think about the nuances of that. And like I think it's the both and, like, having written minutes hopefully allows somebody to click on a link and say, oh, that actually sounds interesting. I want to go hear what they said and dive into this. But it's also, it's never going to capture the work that y'all are doing in these moments, or even the amount of work that y'all put in outside of this to, discuss and dive deeper. And even this recording is only kind of a surface of the work y'all do. But at least expressions and tones and exact word usage can be shared. So I'm a big proponent for the both and of the written word.
And this is Ellen. I absolutely love the written word, especially if it's written in a storyteller fashion. But I also know that as an organization, if you want to communicate with certain communities, you have to go there and speak rather than send any kind of written things. Same with marketing your programs. And I think it would help Metro Arts if you really are trying to reach some of the communities not being reached, if there was a way for them to explain their grant in a video or, you know, their narrative, if they were able to do an oral narration of what their project is going to be that they could submit instead of having to write it out and fill in all those required questions. I mean, they could have the same questions, but allow them to do it orally would be a fair way.
That's been brought up just again in this most recent Thrive cycle, and I'm sure has been brought up before. So really great point, Ellen.
That's an excellent idea.
Mm-hmm.
I work with just in building relationships in community and also trying to build trust with different people. There are people, I mean, I work with people you would think that would honor the written word above anything else, particularly with educators, principals, and teachers. I cannot tell you how many principals and teachers are like, hey, can you just call me? Like no text, no message, no email. Their emails are inundated, especially right now. Can you know, and so which makes this time challenging because just going out, because I like to be in person as much as I can, and it's just not as safe as it was, and also people just aren't available. But I find building trust and building relationship, and also like the reverence to the written word is, I feel like is about diminishing cultures that are about the oral tradition, that are about, and it's a person who essentially is about, my job is programming ritual. That, you know what I'm saying? What is, you know, and it's kind of crazy. And I know sometimes there's things that we do that are very textually based, but kind of to Grace's point, yeah, I start with a script, but what happens at the end is so much more than what's on that page. So it's an interpretation of what's on that page, and you can't define that in a word. You have to experience that. So
I want to be mindful of everybody's time because we are exactly halfway through our meeting time scheduled. So I just want to be mindful. The conversation is great, but I just want to bring that up.
Definitely. And I was gonna maybe suggest, Paula, should we, you know, we have a few more in the list. Instead of choosing a different reading for the next time, maybe just continuing on with the rest of the items next meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be okay with everyone? We can see thumbs up. Okay. All right, thumbs. Okay. That seems like a consensus. Yeah, good. Okay, great. We'll do that so this will be also the reading for the next time. Good thing we didn't pick a long one. This was good. Deep enough. This was, again, quality, not quantity. All right. Thank you all for the time you put into that and the great insights.
We are going to keep going down the list, right? Because there's some more.
Oh, we'll go down the list in the next meeting.
The next one we'll just finish. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess I didn't mean to stop the discussion. I just wanted to be mindful of time. I'm sorry about that. Well, I need to ask all of you to review the agenda and see which topics you would like to discuss or facilitate. Or if there are points of discussion not listed on the agenda, feel free to propose those. So these are the agenda items that Grace has shared with us. So we're revisiting best practices for committee governance. We'll have an update from the Restorative Practice Working Group, an update from the Grant Guidelines Working Group, an update on Metro Public Arts Guidelines, an update on the White Arts Administrator Accountability Group, then an update and call for assistance on the BIPOC Arts Administrators of Nashville Group, and then any other additional items. Would anyone like to kick any of these off?
This is Ellen, the grant guidelines working group. We're meeting next week, so we haven't met unless they've met and I missed it. So I don't know.
No, I think that's correct, Ellen.
Okay.
Thank you, Ellen.
I'm happy to at least kind of give an update on the restorative working group, restorative practices working group. And then John and I think Megan, I think you were the only two here. Terry was a part of that conversation. Oh, Terry's here. Terry as well. But I think Aaron was also a part of that conversation and it's not here. But we were guided kind of by 4 questions that were posed kind of in a previous meeting. The 4 questions were, the first one being, I'll read it. What does restorative practice mean for / within Metro Arts expectations and in the context of the work that HR does and does not do? Where does the support, where can we speaking as the restorative practice work group and care, where can we support and begin the work? Where can we support where the work of HR begins and ends? And then also we talked a little bit about our caucus processes and what that looks like. We've actually been invited into that process, and I'm looking forward to hopefully attending that next meeting for the People of Color Caucus. And so we just kind of start.
Trey, you muted yourself.
Yeah, Trey, we can't hear you.
How long was I muted?
You were looking forward to to being a part of the process of the People of Color Caucus.
Oh, okay. Yes. Not too long. Okay. Yeah, so we talked about that. And then one of the things that I thought was interesting that we discussed, which is interesting because I guess Jenny and I don't want to step on your toes, but updating, we talked about just evaluating internally and kind of ways to give feedback. And I think there's been a small update in staff since that discussion and kind of how we as employees interact with management and kind of the ways that we are able to give our feedback is something. And then the next steps, I think, for our next conversation, we're kind of looking into HR policies, discovering if we even have an anti-bullying policy of any sort, or anything that would protect our staff. And yet, I don't know if anyone has anything else to add, but I think we were just kind of getting started in that conversation. So I look forward to kind of following up with another meeting soon. But yeah, that's what's going on with the Restorative Arts Working Group. So thank you.
I'll jump in with my 2 updates. I attended the town hall for the Arts Administrators of Color group and checked in with their co-chair of their chapter expansion committee. And so they do have like really specific, like groups in mind, and they are prioritizing groups that are not already housed within an institution. However, the co-chair does like see value in that. Either way, we can gather as BIPOC arts administrators of Nashville. I do have a kind of a penciled in date of gosh, I think it's the 15th or the 16th next week. I might change it. It just seems too quick. However, I also don't mind, again, like to kind of like move away from, like typical norms of like what makes a big, successful, flashy event with tons of people and like buzz. Like if like 3 people show up and we have like an earnest conversation, like I'd be thrilled. So I might just have it and just go from there and just build from that, and try to not have that pressure of like, this needs to be like a successful event. I just want it to be an event that's good and meaningful. But I'd love all of your help on inviting. I don't want, I had like inviting the folks who would be interested, who would, in this group. And yeah, so just, I guess, follow up with me. I'll try to follow up with you. And there's that update. And the update, on the Black Lives Matter mural. So we had an application from the Black Lives Matter movement collective into Thrive, and it went through all the processes. So it first went through the coaching period. Trey, Grace, and I, Attilio also, we worked with the organizers on their application. They submitted successfully. They went through the staff eligibility review, community panel, and then were approved by the Public Art Committee, and then the Grants and Funding Committee. So now the next step is review and approval by the committee, the Full Arts Commission Board on the 15th, but it is kind of chugging away. They were successful, in part because of our, the Metro Arts kind of facilitation with Public Works. They were successful in getting their street closure permit for the intersection of Woodland. It's Woodland by the JDC, by the juvenile detention. I think it's Woodland and Second, I believe. And they were able to get that permit and have done their own fundraising. So I think they feel that they would do it with or without Thrive funding. So that announcement would come next Thursday, but they've been in the media already and just kind of announcing and talking things up. So this might get more press as it comes into fruition. I think plans are going to be starting like in a couple weeks. Like the 17th is like, I think their updated timeline of when it begins. So there's that. Just to give just an overall brief Thrive update. This was the first year we included the cultural equity scoring criteria, which we literally pulled language from the Metro Arts cultural equity statement. So, projects to score highly in this category, projects had to not only include people, artists and communities from that have been, previously underrepresented with arts in arts funding, but kind of include them in a significant way. So decision making, design, all of that, not just representational or symbolic. So I'm proud to say that I feel like all the projects do have that as part of their worked into their projects, because we mentioned the scoring criteria in the, in the coaching, and of course it's in the guidelines, and the panel, the community panel, was made aware of it. So there's that, I think. So those are my, those are my two.
Penny, do you have
I
any
guess-
other public arts?
Yes,
Sorry,
I was gonna update you guys about the public art guidelines. So we have not begun the process of taking a complete and total look at the guidelines yet. We do have a public art meeting, I believe tomorrow, scheduled for tomorrow. So it's possible we could talk about it a little more. There are a couple of things we're trying to get approved through our PAC within the beginning of the year, before the beginning of the year. So I think it's unlikely that we'll begin that process this year. But we did propose 2 small changes to our guidelines, or 3 small changes to our guidelines, as we prepare for Cassie Gardner Senior Park. We're trying to do something where we can actually offer stipends to a panel who will actually help, I guess, input on the process ahead of the call to artists actually being released. So the guidelines that we got changed were we extended it from 5 to 9 to 5 to 11 to give us the flexibility to kind of pad the panels with more community members. And then also we clarified language that required a community member to be a part of the panel. It now requires that they are officially a resident of that community, and we can, so that language actually gives us a way to kind of create a stamp of approval for that process, and making sure that it's clear what we mean by a community member as someone who's living or working in the area. And then finally, we just created some language that allows them to provide input on our public art process prior to the call to artists being released. So typically that's work that we do as staff. We develop a scoring criteria and goals for the project that are released to the selection panel and to the artists interested in applying. So the idea is to bring in community members ahead of that and kind of allow them to help work with us and a facilitator to hopefully craft those goals and scoring criteria in our public art process. So we're kind of still on pause for the big public art look, but these are kind of small changes that I'm hoping can help us do something a little different with Kasi Gardner Park coming up. So, thank you.
Thank you, Trey.
Not to take up too much space, I will try to be quick, so I know we have other items to discuss. We'll just round out this staff update. So first, it's not on the list, but we have, as a staff, passed it all around and finally gotten at least a fairly good working draft of the programs and initiatives. There was one little tweak, but I will upload that directly after this meeting. It's in the SharePoint that has all of that. Please let me know if you want me to resend the links. As a reminder, our community members have editable access and our commissioners have view only, keeping with the sort of Open Meetings Act. But I've gone ahead and uploaded links to past recordings, minutes. There's a lot of information in there, but just to reiterate, if you guys ever have interest or curiosity or want something else, please shoot me an email and I'll get that uploaded so that you can take a look. And then, so we had our first meeting of the White Arts Administrators Anti-Racism Accountability Group that we had mentioned in the last meeting. Just to briefly recap, this is something that we're doing in partnership with ABC, the Arts and Business Council of Nashville. But we do, the intention and the hope on several fronts is, one, that it will be a group that is led by the participants, so it won't necessarily be Metro Arts or ABC providing a curriculum or leading it. We're hoping to act more as space holders so that everybody involved can really get into the work. Currently, we've just invited executive directors of arts organizations in Nashville. There is no size limit. That decision was made partly on initial capacity, but also if we had to limit the group, sort of bringing in sort of the power brokers of organizations. Obviously, in an ideal world and a future hope, we hope that we can continue to expand that to other arts administrators of all levels. There is an unclear and undefined hope that this group will work in direct accountability at some point to the BIPOC Arts Administrators Group, so that there is actually that sort of accountability and link there. In the first meeting, we just talked about group norms and expectations and got everybody sort of a chance to give their input or ask questions. The next two sessions are going to be facilitated by Amy Smith, who is a fantastic facilitator and has done a lot of anti-racism work. It's still a bit in planning, but her sessions are going to be focused on kind of building a sort of a shared understanding and dialogue. And so we hope to continue that. And then in January, we're hoping to reevaluate and pass more of the control and leadership on. So want to keep y'all updated. I did also want to note that we're approaching this very much as a process group and not a checkmark group, I guess. So if at any point y'all would like to give us input or feedback or suggestions about the formation of this group, I think we at least are coming at it from the perspective of we are not experts. We're probably learning alongside, not probably, we are learning alongside everyone in the group. So we appreciate and invite guidance. And I don't know that anything about this group will ever be necessarily set in stone. So even as we've begun, there's always room for input if any of y'all feel so moved on that front, or if we give you an update and you feel that we're moving in perhaps an unproductive or unhelpful direction, we certainly, appreciate all of the wisdom you'll have on that front.
Thank you, Grace. Go ahead. Somebody was going to ask a question. John, was that you?
Yeah, is that okay? Can I
Sorry. Yeah. Because I had some questions too. Go ahead.
So the BIPOC Arts Administrators of Nashville group, is that also only open to top execs, or is that open to folks at all levels?
Folks at all levels.
Yeah. So I would just like to challenge that assumption, because what's happening is you're keeping that dialogue at the top, and it begs the question of sort of what happens within the organization. And also, I think it's very important for executives to be participating in this and held accountable to the work. But if you want to build capacity within the organizations, you're going to have folks at all levels be part of that. And in fact, prioritizing executives is, also kind of, it's hierarchical and therefore tied into all of the, systems that keep white supremacy values in place. Let me turn on my light.
Thank you for that, Jonathan. And that is something that we're certainly wrestling with. And I think it's important to appreciate you pointing out those things. So we certainly are thinking and welcoming feedback about how this can be something that everyone can participate in.
And this is not me angling to be part of the group. It's actually thinking really about what you want this group to be, right?
No, absolutely, truly. I think
Just to jump in for you, Grace, like I've heard I think it's the balance or the considerations of, I mean, if you keep all the power, if it's only executives, like, well, there's power hoarding, which is like literally one of the characteristics of white supremacy. But then the other argument is, things need to be shifted in place, and there needs to be buy-in from those seated in power. So I mean, I see both. I mean, I brought up both, I'm like, it makes me feel funny that it's just the executives, but I get it too, because you need the buy-in. So I just, yeah.
But you can have the
Wanted to add
buy-in
that.
by having executives be part of the group and also having folks at other levels of the organization. And if you're having the right conversations, then folks who are not executives actually feel empowered to speak into the conversation and to help facilitate the cultural shifts that need to happen within the organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe there has to be something like, well, I guess I don't want to answer for you, Grace. It's your, this is your work. But I just was part of that conversation of like, how do you just make it not, oh, I'll send this other person, but I'm not really going to do the work kind of thing. That's what we're trying to avoid.
Right. Well, and I think there's a way to say, for participation, we would like to have the executive, the top executive, and one other member of your staff. And in fact, we encourage you to think about bringing in folks who maybe are in coordinator or manager positions who otherwise don't always have voices in these conversations.
I like that idea. And yeah, there have certainly There's a lot of thoughts going through my brain at the moment, and I can't pick which
And
one's
I'm sorry, I
going
didn't mean
on
to
my
put you on the spot. This is not about being
No, no.
confrontational, but just sort of recognizing that, there is an opportunity here, particularly if the goal is to also facilitate points of connection between the two groups. Let's make sure that the cultural norms and values of each of the groups are as aligned as possible as well.
Absolutely. I think that's really important. And something that I didn't quite touch on is one of the things that was acknowledged at the beginning was that groups, especially in terms of accountability, groups like this have been created before and sort of fizzled out, or they've hit a brick wall at some point. And I think one of the major goals of this group is to have it be a continual process and try to really move through those, barriers to actually, we've talked about facilitating actual meaningful change. And so challenge isn't the right word, but I think it's necessary and vital to have those. Have you thought about this? Well, are you reinforcing this by doing this? I think that is perhaps the only way that this group is, legitimately successful. So I really appreciate all this.
Grace, I have 2 quick questions for you, maybe 3.
Yes.
How many people attended the meeting?
So the first meeting was attended by, I would say, 25 people, maybe 28, including ABC and Metro Art staff. So it was me and Caroline, and Jill McMillan-Palm, who's the executive director, and Jonathan Harwell-Dye was there for ABC.
Okay. And then my second question, I like your idea of this group offering feedback to them. Is there a way to be able to share meeting minutes or something like that, to where it's a little bit more in depth? I'm not worshiping the written word, but just to understand a little bit more about what's happening within the meeting.
Absolutely. And that is, we're in a bit of a discovery phase with that. So for the first meeting, the documents that were generated were group norms and the goals. Given that we're trying to build sort of a more horizontal structure, I think I would probably want to check with the participants that they feel comfortable, or on what level they feel comfortable sort of engaging with this committee in terms of shareables. Mm-hmm. But we are kind of trying to balance that idea of okay, so this is in some ways a bit of a private space for people to, there's some influence from the caucusing process, whereas we're trying to build a space of what's said there stays there, but what's learned leaves. So it's not caucusing, but we are trying to take some of the lessons from that. But given that, we're sort of exploring the idea of a share out in the same way that caucuses may not transcribe what was said or identify people, but share out something that is sort of well, these were the discussions or the explorations, these were the things we came to. So that is a really good point, and we're still a bit in the weeds with it, but it's something we can certainly consider.
Okay, thank you.
This Ellen, I attended that, and there was so much diversity and levels there because, in the working group or whatever I was in, there was one person who was in a new nonprofit and the only employee, had no one above or below. There were others who were in director positions of large organizations with many people on many different levels. And so, there was, it felt to me like just putting our toes in, and we were all at different levels of analysis and, our experience in the work and our training. And, but everyone there seemed very earnest about, diving into the work. So I think it's kind of hard yet. That was the only meeting, right? I think it's kind of hard yet to even know how the group is going to evolve. But I agree with Jonathan that a lot of times it's not the executive director that sets the tone within an organization. Sometimes it's that next level that actually works with the staff and the people that they serve. So that's all.
No, thank you for that insight, Ellen. And I would love this to be sort of a continuing conversation about how we can expand that. Because even in hierarchical structures, as you point out, Ellen, like the power dynamics aren't always perfectly hierarchical, or there's a lot going on there. So I would love to continue to discuss this. But I know we are approaching time, and Terry, I believe you had questions about public comment and public access and accommodation for these meetings.
Yes, thank you. Along the way, from art to care, we've often, quite often talked about, well, what about the community in terms of their knowledge of what is happening, what we're trying to do, what the work's about. It's about them. And where is their voice in our consideration of the work, which is representative of them? So the two things I wanted to find out, because it seems like every branch of city government handles public meetings differently when it comes to the public being a part of it as a participant, and not just a voyeur. So I wanted to find out what is our process or policy for people calling in, or when we're back in a physical space attending. How does that work for Metro Arts?
Absolutely, and I'm happy to give you the logistical rundown. But this is something I think the nuance of can certainly be discussed and improved upon. So currently with the virtual meetings, what we are doing is, so for example, this committee, we're not legally required to have public comment. And I have to admit the logistics of which have been a bit overwhelming. So we don't currently have public comment for our committee meetings. We are certainly welcome to do that if it's desired. And so at this point in time, what I would do to set that up is I would either work with ITS and the Metro Nashville network to live stream this. And then I would be down with ITS at a phone bank so people could call in. Trey's actually had experience with this. Or I would be in a physical location and people could come into that location, obviously socially distanced, mask, temperature checks, and make a comment into the meeting. That's actually what we're going to do for our Arts Commission meeting next Thursday. We'll be at the Metro office building in the Nashville room. So I'll be there with an IT representative, and we'll have a socially distanced podium where people can come. And at certain points within the agenda, our chair, Marilena, will pause for public comment. In terms of how we let people know about this, so when I publicly notice the meetings, as y'all are copied on, that has that access information on it. So it's sent to a media list, council, our commission, y'all, I think a couple other people. And then we also, so when we post the agendas, that's kind of part of the lead time, is so that people can theoretically access them on our nashville.gov page. So I think that's the bare bones, and I hope I answered your question. But there's certainly, as I said, room for improvement in our practices in terms of actually accessing communities with that information.
Grace, will you walk through the process pre-COVID?
Yeah, so the process pre-COVID was kind of like what we're doing with the room. As y'all will remember, we'd all meet in a room, and so instead of just being me and an ITS person, people could come and physically join the meeting, and they couldn't necessarily comment in the meeting until invited. But it would be set up in the sort of the process and the run of show for meeting. So on a certain topic, you'd ask for public comment. Though it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. I believe, for example, this committee just wanted to open up a moment for public comment outside of agenda items. I believe that's also totally within the bounds. So if we didn't necessarily want to limit what they could comment on. But it kind of the same processes, but they would all take place in a physical space. I would need to probably talk with legal about the possibility of people being able to call into a physical meeting. I don't actually know the guidelines on that. Though, to be fair, it would increase accessibility so people don't have to come to a physical location and physically be with us, which I know can be tough.
Grace, when you send out access and information about the commission meetings and talk about public comment, does it go to all the grantees and like the individual artists that have been funded through Thrive and stuff?
No, it technically does not, though I do like that idea.
It goes through Arts Alert now. This has been just new. This is like in the past 2 Arts Alerts. We just have included a section in Arts Alert that says like upcoming meetings, and it will list committee meetings and the commission meeting. But it's not a direct email to, you can always opt out of Arts Alert. So it's definitely an improvement from, I think, previous meetings were like buried, not on our website, like on the Nashville Gov, not using that as an excuse, but we have at least put it on Arts Alert.
Okay, so, and I totally understand the process of working out an IT strategy that doesn't currently exist, and in COVID time looks different than not COVID time. So and I would like to see, I think we would like to see what that might look like just in terms of planning or just addressing the possibilities, both as we are still meeting remotely, but as we move into whatever phase is going to allow us to be more in person. But while that happens, since it is publicly noticed, I think a wider distribution in some way would be really good in terms of letting the wider community know that they can access the meetings once they've been posted. But if they want to make comment at that point, what's the process for getting those in and reviewed, which I think would be great if they came past the CARE group as well.
So currently, what I forgot to mention, what we do offer for both the commission and the committee meetings in terms of public comment is they can email me if they do have public comment before the meeting. And to be honest, we haven't gotten an email with a public comment, but I think we've decided the best practice would be to just share that with y'all verbatim, so there's no kind of translation. So basically, I would read it word for word aloud to y'all for entrance into the public record.
Okay. I know, I'm pretty assured that there are folks that I know that don't realize that they haven't, there hasn't been outward acknowledgement that there's meetings. So and I've seen them in the Arts Alert. So yes, thank you very much. Nice placement on the right nav bar. But there's still folks who don't have any idea that they can access the meetings, or that their voice is they can contribute. So I think if the whole point of the work is taking care of the community, then this should not be done out to the community. I'd like to see us work towards something more inclusive and accessible to that voice.
Grace, if someone wanted to join this this meeting as an attendee, or do we offer that? I know we offer it to staff, and I'm sure we'd offer it to. I mean, there was a council person that joined us. I'm sure staff of folks represented, could email you. But is that a norm? Is that allowed?
So it's my understanding that the answer to that is no, for security reasons, and capacity as well. It's something we've kind of explored, and I believe our legal team was a little wary of that.
So understandable. Can we include in the ways that we advertise public notice of meetings the statement that it's clear first, so it's contained within the
Terry, I'm so sorry. I lost you a little bit on that.
Yeah, we're having problems hearing you.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I don't know what's going on. I'm just asking if we can, along with the messaging that we're currently doing, and hopefully we'll be able to broadcast it more widely, can we simply include additionally that public comment can be made and who it can be made to, so all together?
Yeah. Absolutely, and I can start putting that in the body of the email as well, so that you don't have to click on the attachment. I would say, I think one of my concerns in sort of figuring out this position has been perhaps a larger concern that we have as an organization is our outreach to communities. Because I think you make a fair point. I don't know how far these public notices actually make it, and if they make it to the communities and the people who would be interested in hearing this work or commenting on this work, particularly voices that we would love to hear from and invite, but that doesn't necessarily mean much unless they actually get the invitation. And that might tie into relationship building and trust building that we might need to do.
True, and completely understandable. That's also some capacity that CARE could fulfill as well. Just being able to distribute that information within our own circles, and at least getting it started.
I think that would be incredibly generous. Janine or Terry, I don't know if you have any comment, but I think we're certainly of the opinion that we would love to have that connection with the community, and certainly invite these. They're public for the public.
One thing I will mention is that amidst a lot of the climate with the metro and the budget and just people paying attention a little bit more than usual, we have gotten a little bit of like random trolling from our tweets, and we did, and I say that, and there is kind of a process that Grace and I have kind of been trained on what to do when that happens, but a lot of the work we've done, especially some of the stuff we put out around equity, has gotten some bad responses. So that is something that we've been prepared for, and I think that especially in this space, I think it's likely that people might come and try to disrupt the work, because it seems like if we're, that's what we get when we do push stuff out there, because we're attached to these metro channels. The mayor could post something with public art, just simply a picture of public art, and next thing you know, it's like Metro Arts is racist, and it has nothing to. But I say all that to say, I think it's really good that we can open up this space to allow people to input that's going to help. But we do have to be aware that I think, people might come into the space trying to disrupt the work we're doing. And just having some ways prepared to deal with that would probably, just so we're all on the same page on that.
I completely agree. So, it may not be, and I don't think we're looking for something that's just jump on for the purpose of jumping on. I think having a process that's well vetted and agreed upon is completely appropriate. And even down to, I'm not sure what the internal process is, but the email address that's used might need to have a different decision made about where that is, who possesses it, who's accountable for it, and how it's managed and monitored. So I'm all for whatever protections need to be investigated and cleared. Certainly, absolutely, because you all are the ones that would, be the first ones to deal with any pro or con that would come through whatever channels are opened up. I just think it's time we started talking about what that would look like and how to safely and actively take care of it.
Staff, remind me whether or not, does Public Arts or any of the other committees have like a dedicated email address?
No, so staff has our individual emails, shocking. And then we have one general arts at nashville.gov, which is kind of our catch-all. And I mean, to be transparent, I oversee both my personal and the arts at nashville.gov.
There is also a public art email, I believe. That's just a general inquiries. It's not widely publicized, or it hasn't been recently, so I don't know how much it's used, and I don't actually have access to it. But there is a public art. It's just a general public art at nashville.gov, I believe. But I think we've had people send. I guess often questions about certain calls, so we've used that to kind of streamline where people can ask questions about opportunities or respond with information. But
Okay, thank you.
And I mean, in terms of accountability and transparency, I mean, on the one hand, you guys can see my inbox, or at least request. I think I would have to go through the official process to blank out any personal information, technically. But a potential, in other words, a potential solution to that would be, if somebody on this committee would be sort of, if you have public comment, email Grace and someone else, so that it's not just coming isolated to my inbox. I mean,
can you all not set up a separate, a separate mailbox specifically for that, but it's not combined with your particular email?
I think it's a possibility, because we do have it. I just went back and looked at it. There is the public art at nashville.gov, but I'm not sure. We do have to go through IT to kind of create the account, so I don't know if there are requirements, or I guess Ian would probably know that. Grace, I don't know if you know.
Yeah.
But,
I don't know. I could check in with Ian though, and see what the process is for that. Would y'all be thinking like a specific care one, or like a commission and care, or a commission and committees rather?
When you say commission and committees, what do you mean?
Like, would it be like specifically care public comment, or like arts commission and committees public comment email address? So like public comment at Nashville.gov.
Try to mute yourself while you're typing.
oh, sorry.
Perry, what do you think?
Who? I'm sorry.
Terry, what do you think?
I'm not sure. I don't know if we would. I don't know. I think that's something. I think that's part of the package we probably just think about and decide what. Because I don't know if we need to keep the emails separate, or we need to talk to the other committees to get their buy-in, be a shared source.
I'm happy to ask Ian, who's sort of our technical liaison slash, I would say, security in general, and then report back to y'all with that information so that y'all could make a decision about how you would like to proceed.
Yes, I think that's probably the most practical. Is let's find out if it can be done, and if so, how? What's the internal official policy safety process, and then we can start to, discuss further how what the formal structure will be.
Absolutely, that sounds great.
John, you were going to say something. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. No, I want to piggyback on something that Terry just said. I think that it would require the cooperation with the Public Art Committee to decide, but I think that there's a lot of merit of making it as easy for the community as possible by making it one piece. So, and then, that would be on either members of committees or staff to vet it and to separate those. But I think that making it as easy as possible for community members to comment would be preferable. So,
Good point. Yes.
Good point.
I'd just like to add that in order for this all to work, it really does need to be tied to a strategy to actually engage the community and make sure that we are getting this communication mechanism out in a way that is actually going to create the kind of discourse and input that we're looking for. So we might even think about this in terms of what our objective and our desired outcomes are, and then build accordingly to achieve those results.
So to that point, I would like to suggest that, at least for the further discussion and processing, I'd like to suggest that we make this a permanent part of the agenda. And it can sit right where it is, but so we don't lose sight, and it can actually become, once we have a process worked out, it becomes what we do as a committee, the comments that would be pertinent for us to
So Terry, let me make sure I heard you right. You want to maintain this piece, let it sit right here in the agenda. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, and so then we'll continue to kind of go. So I guess the next, indented bullet point on this would be Trey is going to let us know, or Trey and Grace will let us know what the formal process is within the commission.
Okay, yes.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Can you repeat that? I think that just a little bit of that was distorted for me.
So as we keep this on the agenda until we kind of get it, we finalize whatever that it is, the next piece on here should be like another bullet point that's indented that says that you and Grace are going to come back with information, probably from Ian or Metro Legal, whoever, just to make sure that we understand how this would work. And then I guess the other thing would be that, do we need to, if it's probably going to sit at a bigger level, does this need to go before the commission, or is this something that the staff can go ahead and have done and we don't have to worry about a vote? And I don't know the answer to that. I don't remember ever voting on any email addresses.
I feel that would come under like administrative staff purview, I believe.
Yeah, I think so, because I think Ian, when he has done it when we get new employees, it seems to be just a standard process going through IT and making a request. So yeah, I think if there were any roadblocks, I would imagine it might be with IT saying, "Oh, what is this for?" and kind of us having to justify why we need another account. But I don't. But yeah, we'll check that for sure. Anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't necessarily think we would need permission from the commission, but I don't know if the commission would like to actively be involved in sort of supporting a resolution to expand our outreach in terms of inviting public comment and community engagement. That can be a longer discussion at some other point.
Terry, are you okay with this?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
I would also like, however, to make a consensus from the group.
Okay, that was gonna be next for me.
Okay.
That was next. Hold on, wait a minute. Okay. Is everybody okay with this? And I'll just kind of go down the list, and if you'll just say yay or nay. And then if you want to discuss any point where you might have an issue, just please bring it forward. Ellen?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yes, but again, I'd just like to verbalize, like maybe as a group, we can talk about building strategies to really make this successful, right? And the outcomes we're seeking.
Okay. I think we should make sure that we have strategies to be successful in all of our points. Okay. What did you say? I'm sorry, Jonathan.
I just said amen.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay. Megan.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The only thing that we did not finish on this review agenda was the first bullet point, but being mindful of everybody's time, seeing that we're 10 minutes over, I suggest we move that to the agenda for next month as well. Unless anybody would like to discuss it, I just want to make sure we're mindful of time. I see a thumbs up. See a shaking of head. Okay, so with that, we do need to set our meeting for by consensus for our next time together. And then I think the working groups are just kind of going through, and we'll have more updates from them. So we don't necessarily need to have any action items from them right now. But I do want to make sure we confirm our next meeting. As of right now, I believe we are scheduled for.
I think it's the day after Election Day, I believe.
Yeah.
Do we want to maintain that, or do we need a break? Like a mental health break?
Depends.
This might be the kind of work that we want to dive into.
I'm gonna need y'all that day. I just hope we can gather. I hope I don't need to.
Okay, so we're gonna stay
without saying too much.
Either way, there's going to be a continuation of what's already been, or there's going to be something new. And so either way, I'm going to want to get to work on some stuff. So
absolutely.
Keep it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, John. The 4th it is. That's okay with everybody?
The only point that I would like to bring up is that currently virtual meetings last until October 28th. So I don't know if y'all want to decide on a contingency plan now if we have to meet in person, or if we just like to sort of plan on a virtual meeting and pivot as needed.
I vote for planning on virtual and then pivot as needed.
Great. And just to give insight on someone who did attend an in-person meeting yesterday, the council committee meeting, there are large spaces available with temperature checks and things like that, and masks required and plexi shields. So just hopefully it's virtual, but just FYI, that is available at Music City Center. It seems like that's where things are happening right now.
I also think we want to know what the conditions are like as well. I mean, I think that's a huge piece of the puzzle.
For sure.
Yeah, definitely. Grace, is it that we could never, I mean, what if we choose as a committee to stay virtual? Is that possible? Or do we have to physically go back to meetings?
Unfortunately, because both you and Will are involved, it's tied up in the public meeting business. So that the only reason we can do this now is because the governor has given permission to have these kinds of meetings. So we have been sort of discussing the sort of nuances of if, for example, there's not technically a quorum needed for committees. So in the event that maybe we could have staff and you and Will in a room and then have committee members call in, we're kind of exploring whether that is sort of considered legitimate for a physical meeting or if that's still kind of too close to count.
Okay, thank you for that. So it looks like then we're going to stay with November 4th at 5, planning for virtual pivoting if needed, and we'll figure it out then. Okay. Is there any other business items that we need to discuss this evening? Okay, seeing and hearing none, that completes the business of this meeting. And since we don't have to vote per legal, I can just go ahead and adjourn the meeting. So the meeting is adjourned. All right. Thank you all so much for your time and your energy.